it's impossible for us to be good because we were never bad in the first place. In the trainings that we do together, we talk a lot about these rewarding and rejecting perspectives that we take on as children. And therapists very much pressure themselves to be rewarding objects is the language we use. And it's like trying to perform or prove how much we get people or how much we're there for them. But really underneath it is this fear that we're bad in some way and that we're going to be found out, imposter syndrome, or maybe we have rejecting feelings towards our clients. And that split between being good and being bad is a big part of this whole process, because we're not good or bad because we're not objects. We're humans with all kinds of feelings.
Welcome to the Transforming Trauma podcast. Transforming Trauma is presented by the Complex Trauma Training Center. I'm your host, Emily Ruth, and I'm so glad you've joined us today. Welcome back to Transforming Trauma. Today, I'm joined by Brad Kammer to explore the origin story behind the Inside-Out teaching series at the Complex Trauma Training Center, how it began, and what inspired the first programs in the series. Brad is responsible for the creation of the CTTC professional development programs, including working with Dr. Lawrence Heller in developing the NARM therapist and NARM master therapist training programs offered through CTTC. Brad also guides the mentorship programs involving CTTC faculty, training assistants, and participants, the diversity, inclusion, and belonging efforts, and is the executive producer of the Transforming Trauma podcast. Brad has a passion for cultivating a professional learning community that provides accessibility to ongoing training opportunities and mentorship to a diverse group of mental health professionals in their work with complex trauma. Brad is also the co-author with Dr. Lawrence Heller of the Practical Guide for Healing Developmental Trauma and the Workbook for Healing Developmental Trauma, Tools and Techniques from the Neuroaffective Relational Model. Please enjoy my conversation with Brad Kammer. All right, I'm sitting here with Brad Kammer. Welcome back to the podcast, Brad.
Thank you, Emily. It's always a pleasure to be with you and have this time and space to check in about all the cool things.
Yeah, so many cool things. And today we're talking about the Inside-Out series, but I first want to check in and see what you'd like our listeners to walk away with from our conversation today.
Yeah, I think one of the big learnings I've had over these last, 5-10 years is just how much the training to become a therapist or a helping professional has changed over even just the last 5 or 10 years, and definitely the last 30 or 40 years, and what we're missing and not getting through our training, our education, even our postgraduate training and supervision, and even a lot of the postgraduate trainings that we do, the clinical trainings that we take, that there's something being left out, and that something is our humanity and such a high burnout rate in the field. And so I just feel how important it is to, while we're learning all these important clinical theoretical models and clinical approaches, to also make sure that we're attending to us as humans who are doing this really important and challenging work. And so I'd love people to hear about, a little bit more about my perspective on it, but also just like the programs that we're putting together to support therapists that are interested in getting more personal support as they're in their professional roles.
It's so exciting. And I was really excited because with this Inside Out series, and I'll let you speak more to sort of the inception of that, like where that came from, or the origin story. I know we've done some origin stories and I've been curious like where that came from. But I attended the first narcissism workshop, and what struck me was how different it felt from many trainings. I mean, I think narcissism is out in the world right now, so much being talked about. For me, it wasn't so much about identifying the narcissism in our clients. You really brought it home and encountering it in ourselves. And there was something about that, the way that it was shared, and then the breakout groups, like it was so rich. And I was so excited to be able to have this space to kind of ask you a little bit more about that one and then explore the ones that are coming up.
Yeah, there's this famous quote within the psychology world of, you can't take someone to a place that you haven't gotten to know inside yourself. And so that's a big part of the intention of these classes, is even though it's pretty painful to look at some of these narcissistic or borderline dynamics inside of ourselves, these are often clients that we're reacting to, or even as a society, we're calling people narcissists or calling them borderline. But like, what is it about these experiences with people that are triggering or evoking something inside of ourselves that we haven't gotten to know or that we haven't been able to look at? And what happens as we get to know that? Can we then show up differently with our clients and not have such triggers and reactions? And so, yeah, I think that's the kind of work we were doing together, is getting to know some of this. Some of it's familiar to us, and then some of it is our shadow material that takes some courage to look at.
Yeah, it felt really important that instead of kind of, again, I'm just thinking about things I've seen out on social media and things being talked about. It's so negative and there's such a stigma attached to this idea of narcissism that I think, at least I'll speak from my own experience, it makes it really easy to want to just push that away. Like, no, I don't own any of that. There's none of that is part of me. I want to hold on to this idea that I'm good and show up and I'm a kind person, and like, wow, to be able to acknowledge, yeah, these are things that all of us are working through. It feels really important. So yeah,
Yeah.
really excited to talk about this series. So can we rewind just a little bit? Can you tell us a little bit about where the idea of it came from and why you wanted to do this series?
Sure, but before I do, I want to just respond to something you just said, because I want to own up to my own part of this. Like I'm someone that used to call people narcissists a lot, not necessarily to their face, but like had that strong judgment about people. And I remember like one of my first clinical meetings, I think I was still in my internship, and I remember the supervisor saying like, "Oh, you only can have one borderline client on at a time." And I was like, "Oh, what does that mean? I don't even know really what borderline means exactly." And then all of a sudden I started hearing everyone kind of colluding with that and be like, "Oh yeah, you can only deal with one borderline at a client." And I just felt so objectified around how they were talking, and I didn't even fully understand what they were referring to. I didn't really quite know what they were reacting to. And so over the years, like, how have I contributed to that? Like, how have I so quickly shut that down and just flattened it and be like, "Oh, that's a borderline client," or, "Oh, that person's a narcissist," or, and like, again, there could be elements that are accurate, but why am I so quick having to put it outside and not kind of see what am I reacting to? And
Yeah.
is any of this part of me trying to get away from something that it's evoking inside of me or mirroring inside of myself? And I grew up in a family system with a lot of narcissism. And so, the fact that I was going around thinking a lot of people were narcissists, it took me a while to realize that I need to look in the mirror, which is funny because that's the whole idea of the narcissist. He died because he was staring at himself in the mirror. So yeah, avoiding looking at the mirror, I guess, is another form of it. Yeah, and then realizing that there's so many different forms of narcissism. And yeah, I wasn't a grandiose narcissist, but I had very strong, and still do to a large extent, of the covert forms, which is like taking responsibility for things that aren't mine, particularly things that fail. And so with a client, for example, it's like a client struggling and it's something I did wrong. And it drove me to do a lot of my learning and training. It's like, okay, I'm missing something. I got to go learn this. I got to go figure out how to do better because I'm clearly not doing right or good enough. And then starting to realize that some of that was legitimate in my inquisitiveness and curiosity, and some of it was driven from never being perfect enough and feeling like I'm always failing. And so yeah, I was projecting so much of the grandiose but not realize that I was holding the other side of it,
Mhm.
and then getting into relationships with people where then that's kind of enacted in relationships, whether it's clients or other people. And so all of that was just work that I've been doing, and a lot of us in the community have been doing. And so having a space where we could really start to look at some of these things that are more taboo to look at in a safe way,
Yeah.
non-judgmental way, it just feels so critical. Again, not just for ourselves personally, but it makes us so much better clinicians, because then we're not spending all this energy and all these strategies avoiding things that could evoke things inside of ourselves, which just gives us so much more capacity to be present with things, because we're not spending all this time trying to not look at something or get away from something. So I just wanted
Yeah.
to make sure I own my part of this, because I'm so turned off by like I get it. I get why people are going on to social media and calling all these people out, and people need to be responsible for their accountability and for what they've done. But it also feels just like there's so much projections going on. And is social media the place to actually have these conversations that are really conversations that should be oriented towards repair and not just calling people out? But if you really want people to learn how to not act out some of these patterns, whether they're narcissistic or borderline or whatever, like, how do we have those legitimate conversations? So yeah, again, it starts for me internally. Like, I need to get to know like my relationship to them so that I'm not feeling compelled to kind of act out in those different ways.
Yeah. So here you're really naming getting to know our own internal territory and how we're relating to these patterns or these I don't know, I'm thinking of myself like my own defenses around these things, that's the place to start, or at least that's what I'm hearing, I think. And what my experience was in that class was that it was safe enough to
Mhm.
be open and vulnerable and to really explore that territory with someone else. Because I could go, sit on a mountain and like think about it myself, but I'm not in relationship to someone else. Like, I don't know, that felt really critical, like you were saying. It was a good place to be able to explore it with other people.
Yeah, and part of the safety is just seeing how common these are, that we all share them to some extent. Like, again, that's part of shame. Shame is like, I'm the only one that has this and I can't show it. But the reality is, when you start to show more of your vulnerability, that's where our commonalities lie. Like,
Mhm.
we all have these patterns. These patterns are part of us. That's where I started that narcissism workshop, and I'm going to start the borderline workshop.
Mhm.
This is part of normal development. It becomes, quote, pathological when we have to disconnect from it, and it becomes part of like our personality and the way we relate in the world. And that's why it's so important that we come back into connection with it, because there are elements of it that are really part of our wisdom and part of how we do need to show up in the world at different times. And so hearing other people kind of also have the courage to share that is part of what creates that safety in the environment, I think, for
Mhm.
myself. And
Yeah. So, is it okay if we now
yes,
go back and
yeah, yeah.
okay. Yeah, so I wanna hear, like, where did these come from, this series, these classes? So we started with the narcissism one, the borderline one is coming up, and then there's another one.
So, Stephanie Marsh and I, who are kind of the core faculty of the Complex Trauma Training Center, we've been supporting clinical trainings for me and Marcia have been doing it for 25 years. And it was somatic experiencing at first. And then we moved over and started supporting NARM. And then we started, becoming teachers in NARM. And I love that. I love doing the clinical trainings. And the NARM is special and close to my heart and the way I work with all my clients. And I still love this SC and respect SC, even though I don't use it as much as I used to. But one of the things that the three of us in our conversation started realizing is that our heart was really in the mentorship. Our heart was really in giving support to therapists and creating a community for therapists, regardless of what clinical modalities we use, even though we might have our favorite ones. Because so many of us come in this profession because we want to grow, we want to heal, and we're not getting a lot of opportunities to do that. So again, when you come into most clinical trainings, and it's so much of the outside in learning. It's like, this is the protocol. This is the way I'm going to teach you how to do this. And you got to learn how to adapt to this new protocol, this new model. And I really wanted to kind of work the other way, is like, how do we use our inner world to then support whatever clinical approaches or clinical models we use? And so that was the origins of kind of the space program that we created last year. So it was about, again, from any clinical background, therapists or helping professionals that want to learn about the inner world of the therapist and the ways that these different kind of patterns and themes come up for us that get in our way of being more present, being more effective, having greater connection with our clients, or even greater access to something larger than ourselves, like the transpersonal level that we also talk about in space, because we talk about the three levels of experience: the personal, the interpersonal, and the transpersonal. And then very soon when we started doing space, I realized we just needed more time with most of these topics. Some topics you can do in half a day or a day, but there was definitely a bunch of topics that I was hearing from people like, oh, we're just scratching the surface. And so that's where like we're really mindful that people only have a limited amount of time and financial ability to commit. And so we didn't want to expand space at this point. And so the idea was for people that wanted to do some of these topics in a much more intensive way, then we would kind of create this Inside Out series that's kind of a sister program to Space, where people can go into these topics in a deeper way. The structure of the class is very much like Space, but it's just one topic instead of kind of going through. Usually we go through 4 topics in a weekend of Space, and this is just one topic we go through in 2 days, basically.
One thing I really loved about the narcissism workshop and our class and the smaller breakout groups and the dyads was that I got to meet so many clinicians that they're not NARM trained. They might do some other model. They might work with kids. They might work, but they were still so invested in their internal work that I got to meet so many great people and have these really deep conversations. It was so cool. And like you said, not everyone can plan to invest in a longer, training or whatever. And so this is a way that they can really experience the community and kind of the vibe of the community in a way that is doable for them. So I really enjoyed that. I just wanted to slip that in, meeting all the cool people.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, because there's so many people doing such great work out there, and we have very busy, complicated lives outside of being a therapist, and then the world is very stressful and trying for many of us. And so, having a place where we can kind of plug back in, even just for a 2-day weekend or a series of classes, or even that we do regular consults, all those kind of things. And just knowing that you're going to be in a community where there's depth and people are willing to look at themselves. Because, and again, in many communities, psychological groups, there's just a lot of focus on the client. And of course, our clients are super important, but we're bypassing something very important when we just focus on our clients.
Right.
And in these Inside Out programs, we're not bypassing that. It starts with us. And then we can start looking at our clients once we're more connected to what's happening inside of us.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
And it's a gift we can give to our clients too, because otherwise we're at the risk of projecting a lot of stuff onto them that we're not even aware of.
Do you want to talk more about the narcissism workshop? I mean, I was curious what you learned from doing it.
Yeah, there's a very easy answer for me.
Okay.
It's not an expected answer exactly, but like it was the courage. It was the courage of the folks in there, because they signed up to look at their own narcissism. Like already it's self-selected. And then the people that were in there, including yourself, and me, I'm part of it too, because I shared about some of my experiences. It takes a lot of courage to do that, and to do that individually inside of ourselves. And then, like you said, in these groups to share it. And I was just so blown away by the level of vulnerability and authenticity and how little strategies people were using. And people were just honest, and lots of compassion and acceptance and gratitude and connection. And I think that was my main takeaway. And it's not necessarily unique to that program, because we have that a lot in a lot of our programs, but there was something about the topic being so threatening for a lot of us, because we've been so harmed by narcissists or people that have narcissism. And to take accountability that lives in us in different ways. And even if we haven't really acted it out on other people, we've acted it in a lot.
Yeah.
And we've hurt ourselves. And so that's just something that takes a lot of courage to look at. And
so much bravery. It was really touching, moving. Like you said, how folks were willing to engage and be vulnerable.
Yeah. So I think that would probably be the main takeaway. I mean, I really love having discussions about both some of the different forms of narcissism that people really relate to, and then the way that shows up in the enactments with our clients. We were mostly focusing on how it shows up with our clients, although I'm sure in some dyads people were probably talking about their personal lives, but the frame of the class was to focus on how this shows up with our clients. And if we're not aware of what's happening inside of us, we can play this out. And I really learned a lot about the different forms of narcissism. We kind of focused on 4 different ones. We talked about some of the more overt forms, but generally therapists are more in the covert forms. And we talked about therapeutic narcissism and communal narcissism as being 2 forms of narcissism that tend to show up a lot for therapists. So therapeutic narcissism is a lot about kind of seeing clients as an extension of ourselves And it can go in both directions, taking pride out of their growth and their progress, taking over responsibility for them and their process. But it can also flip and be covert, which is like blaming ourselves when our clients are stuck, even though we, have very little to do with it. And then the communal narcissism is one that I think is also very important for us. It comes up a lot for people that are activists or advocates in different roles, which therapists are, people that have been hurt, traumatized and stuff. And, typically they would probably call it like the savior complex or performative allyship, or I don't know. There's different terms that get thrown out around, but it's like taking a certain kind of pride in us being kind of morally righteous and being on the good side of things, and how that can show up and kind of distort the way we hold space for clients that often have a lot of duality inside. And it's, it's never just usually one thing. There's often a mix of things. And so when we are too quick to choose sides, sometimes even clients can feel coerced by us, even though it's in the name of something that's got high value. So I think, again, looking at some of those different forms of how it plays out in therapy can be very enlightening.
And I'm sure we'll discuss this even more with the borderline class. But again, one thing that I experienced in that class, the narcissism class, was you supported a space where we were moving from this just cognitive learning into a really direct experiential kind of learning that, again, was so moving to witness, but also to experience. It was challenging, but also really, really beautiful in so many ways. So I anticipate that will be the case with the next class. But I just wanted to name that was my experience with the narcissism class.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Like, I did a couple sessions or explorations with people, and in doing that in a group setting is, again, so courageous and so moving. And, seeing people who have felt objectified or objectifying themselves start to kind of feel more three-dimensional, start to feel more of their subjectivity, their authenticity. It's just so powerful to be part of.
Well, can you share a little bit with us about the upcoming borderline class?
Yeah, the idea is that these are all inside-out workshops. So we have 3 this year. The first one we did narcissism from the inside out, which I think we're going to make it available, the recording, since a lot of people who weren't able to attend live really want to be part of it. So hopefully we'll get that out there soon. The one on May 1st and 2nd is going to be the borderline from the inside out. And then the one in November will be intergenerational and cultural trauma from the inside out, which is going to be another very important one that's really going to focus on kind of lineage work and ancestral work, even if we know nothing historically or contextually, how it lives inside of us and how we relate to what we carry inside of ourselves that's often very unconscious. So the one on borderline is going to be very similar to the one on narcissism. We'll kind of start by looking at, we're not going to spend too much time defining it. We're just going to kind of get us all on the same page about what's the kind of typical way that people talk about borderline, and then start to really kind of unpack it into the lived dynamics that show up. So, for example, one of the things we talked about in the narcissism workshop is the extreme sensitivity that comes up. So, for example, feedback. People are very sensitive who have more narcissistic dynamics. And so any kind of feedback can be just extremely painful, and they can have really intense reactions to that. So sometimes they just call it narcissistic sensitivity. But there's a different kind of sensitivity around borderline, which is about the relationship and about the fears around separation or distance or disconnection relationally. And so much happens. For example, here's an example I think of a lot, like now with texting. And it's like, you're waiting for your partner to get back. And if you don't see those bubbles on your iPhone, which means that they're typing, like what's happening inside of a person, what's the stories they start to make up about their partner cheating on them or whatever that is. It's like that is hitting something that's very deep, going back to our childhood, that is about dependency needs that we didn't get fully met, and then how we bring that into our adult life. And yes, it does turn, quote, pathological, because when you're trying to get your childhood needs through adult relationships, particularly when there was so much insecure attachment, people are going to have reactions to you either clinging, or demanding or threatening, which are some of the patterns you see with borderline. Again, I think a lot of us know these patterns and they've shown up in different relationships where our insecurities come up and we're very sensitive around being rejected or being left behind or even just like not being fully understood or seen. So there's a whole spectrum we're going to talk about, a whole borderline spectrum. And I'm sure most people are going to be able to see themselves somewhere along that spectrum. And then, of course, that hopefully will help us to, well, I shouldn't say of course, I hope that it will help us have more compassion then for our clients that have more strong borderline patterns.
I'm sort of still existing in my experience with the narcissism class because I feel like it just happened. And I've been just thinking about it a lot. And I'm anticipating what can we look forward to in terms of like our own learning and how that might help shift a therapeutic relationship.
I am struggling to get the exact quote because I'm going to totally mess the quote up, but there's a great quote that I'm going to use, which you've heard me use in the past. It's impossible for us to be good because we were never bad in the first place. And that's an important piece of this whole thing is the splits between what we call, in the trainings that we do together, you and I, Emily, we talk a lot about these rewarding and rejecting perspectives that we take on as children. And therapists very much pressure themselves to be rewarding objects is the language we use. And it's like trying to perform or prove how much we get people or how much we're there for them. But really underneath it is this fear that we're bad in some way and that we're going to be found out, imposter syndrome, or that, or maybe we have rejecting feelings towards our clients. And that split between being good and being bad is a big part of this whole process because we're not good or bad because we're not objects. We're humans with all kinds of feelings. And that's going to be a big piece about kind of healing that split that is very strong for people with borderline dynamics. And then, another piece for us as therapists is which is a related piece, is about the difficulty with boundaries. And this is something a lot of therapists struggle with. A lot of people in romantic relationships or other kind of relationships struggle with. They're afraid that if they set a boundary, authentic boundary to take care of themselves, they're going to lose the relationship. And the reality is that does happen. Not all the time, but it does happen. And if it does happen, can they be okay with themselves? And if it doesn't happen, then what does the relationship look like now that they're actually listening to themselves and setting appropriate boundaries for themselves? So these are some kind of things that emerge from that split between feeling like a rewarding versus rejecting object, because a lot of therapists really struggle with boundaries. Things like time boundaries to money boundaries, ethical gray areas to things like termination. I mean, even like taking vacations and the client gets mad. And so, okay, I'm going to call you while I'm on vacation. And, like all those kind of little things that maybe we kind of justify, but might be coming out of a place that, again, if those keep on accumulating, they start to burn us out.
Yeah, I really appreciate you speaking to that because we hear a lot again about burnout, and that's one thing that in our trainings I really started looking at is what are the ways that I'm burning myself out and these borderline sort of tendencies that we can have to not have needs to sort of cut ourselves off and not set boundaries. It's a theme for sure. So we can look forward to that in the class.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch. I'm going to save some of them for the class, but I have one more that I was thinking about, which is this one about what does it mean to us when our clients quit on us, whether they ghost us or whether they tell us that, hey, I'm not going to be working with you anymore. And like that is very painful for many therapists. That's a really interesting territory to look at because a lot of therapists are constantly kind of ingratiating themselves so that their client won't leave them. And not only is that really unhealthy for the therapist, but it's really taking agency away from the client. And again, this is often very subtle. People aren't intentionally doing this. That's just really rare. Sometimes people are thinking about money and if they lose the client, but that's not generally what's happening.
Mhm.
But it is real dynamics. And then I've heard from a lot of clients that they should have quit a year or two ago, but they felt like they were afraid to tell their therapist.
Wow.
So there's going to be things to look at around that. And, what does it mean to separate in a healthy way without having these strong reactions around abandonment and dependence and the loss of connection and
Mhm.
things like that?
And in case folks don't know, it's such a deep experience. It's 2 days, and so there's so much space to explore all these things. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, and I want to just reiterate something you said before. This isn't top-down learning. Like, we're not doing a lot of theoretical teaching about these things. It's really, these are like jumping off points into how they live within us and how they live between us and our clients, and the different ways that you talked before about getting into dyad groups and group discussions. And we did some role plays. We'll do a few more role plays, which are
Cool.
often quite evocative and fun.
Mhm.
Yeah, so different ways of we'll do more of the guided explorations. And that's a group process that we're holding together. And so there's just like different pathways of this inside out learning. And you mentioned this before, but we're very committed to creating this as safe as possible environment where people can go as deep or not. If they just want to kind of be there to take in the material, they can modulate themselves. Most people do really like to use the groups and the reflections to go deeper in themselves. It's a really wonderful opportunity to do that. But no one's forced to do anything in these groups. So people can just get the information and be part of it if that's most comfortable to them too.
Yeah, I appreciate you kind of naming the level of engagement. There's obviously agency there. So
Yeah. Yeah.
cool. And did you say the dates? What are the dates on that one?
Yeah, the borderline from the inside out is Friday, May 1st and Saturday, May 2nd. And then I wish I had the dates off the top of my head for the
I'll pull it up.
intergenerational cultural, but I believe it's early November of 2026. Here. It
Yeah,
is,
November 6th
yep,
and
Friday,
7th.
November 6th and Saturday, November 7th for the intergenerational and cultural. People don't have to have done anything with us before. If you're a regular listener and have thought about maybe doing a class with us, this could be a good starting point for you. Or if you've been through a lot of our different trainings or programs, we'd love to have you for that too.
So folks can check out the website. The web pages are beautiful. There's so much information there. If folks are interested, they can go check that out at thecomplextraumatrainingcenter.com. Well, is there anything else you wanted to name before we log off here?
We've talked about this already, but I think just this reminder of how these descriptions that we use, like borderline or narcissist, like they're really meant to just kind of capture certain patterns or dynamics. They're not meant to be judgments of human beings. And, the field of psychology hasn't always done well with that. And it has used those terms to dehumanize. And a lot of people in our community have been on the receiving end of that. And that's painful and hard. And I want to recognize that and also just make sure that we're going to do, people know that we're going to do the best we can to humanize that. And I strongly believe we all are on the spectrum. I just don't believe if you look hard enough inside yourself, you're not going to be able to find some of these borderline or narcissistic dynamics because they live inside of all of us because they're part of the natural developmental process. And the more we get to know them, just the more we have control of them and can learn how to be in relationship with them in ways that can really support us in our clinical work. And for me, that's really exciting. I love shadow work. I love this depth-oriented work. And so I'm committed to trying to create, as safe as environment as possible that we can do this work together. And we'd love to have folks that have been with us and new folks. It's fun to grow our community. And like you said, all the connections are really fun too.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, well, I just want to say again, Brad, I just so appreciate the way that you model this, the way that you're holding this, that I think it just does so much to create that space for all of us to be able to show up in our own, authenticity and be vulnerable and to be able to really take in this material and let it kind of work on us.
Yeah, and thank you. I really appreciate that. And it's going to be really interesting for me because that Narcissism from the Inside Out workshop was really working on me for months and months as I was building that program. And I'm not experiencing the same with the borderline so far. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I still have a few months, but it's very interesting how much of the narcissism lived inside of me. And it's not that there's not the borderline dynamics inside of me, but it's already interesting for me to see how I'm relating to this, which makes sense because we all have our
Mhm.
things. And I've never quite struggled as much with clients with borderline that I have with narcissism. And so it makes sense that this topic is just not as triggering for me. So I don't know. I don't know what that's going to mean for how the class feels.
Mhm.
But I'm already noticing that. So it's interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah, kind of gives us all permission to just be curious about how we're holding these things and open to whatever we have to learn.
Yeah, I just want to say for you, just so nice that you're part of our community and you're not, you're interviewing me, but you're also from the inside out. You've been part of these experiences together. And I didn't
Mhm.
ask as much maybe as I would have liked to about like any of your sharing. And I don't know if there's anything you wanted to finish with about any of your takeaways from
Mm.
the narcissism from the inside out.
Yeah, I wish I had my little notebook right here. There were so many gems, so many moments. I mean, I'll just say, yeah, those dyads, they were so rich. This is kind of an interesting thing. Maybe we'll cut this out, but
Yeah.
I found myself feeling like I needed to keep moving around my house.
Hmm.
Like I don't know what that was about, but it
Yeah.
was like there was some kind of energy inside of me that I was like maybe trying to displace or something. Like
Uh-huh.
it was fascinating. I'll just say that. I've never quite experienced that. But at the end of at the end of Saturday, there was kind of this peace that sort of settled in and sort of a self-compassion
Mm.
around it and, a little bit more awareness around kind of how those patterns are living inside me and how I maybe sort of have acted out and acted in. And I just so appreciated the experience. And I know that it shifted work considerably with one client and
Mm.
some other clients. I just noted some shifts. So I mean, I'm just sharing that. Obviously, everyone's experience is going to be different, but that was part of my experience. And so I'm excited to see with the borderline one what arises for me. So
That's wonderful. Is there one thing that you would hope out of the borderline workshop?
That's a really good question. Well, you named that there's kind of an overlap of the covert narcissism and the borderline. I'm very curious about that. That's actually not something I've heard anyone say, but I've always held that. Like I noticed that there's kind of this overlap. So I'm really curious to learn about that. And again, kind of how I'm internally, what's happening for myself around that. But I think similarly to how I felt with the first workshop, really just having some more self-compassion around it. Because again, I know these are patterns that all of us hold, like you said. So I think I have had, in the past, I've had mentorship that was a phrase I just heard thrown out about clients. And it's just like, ugh, that's tough. So I'm excited to be in a space where the person at the front of the room is relating to it in such a different way. That just is so exciting for me.
And if you have any things you'd like me to cover, I still have a couple months, so let me know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll send you some notes.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Some
Yeah.
things. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Brad. So appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate
and
you.
we'll meet again.
I look forward to that.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode. To find more information about our guest, check the show notes or visit us at complextraumatrainingcenter.com/transforming trauma.
Licensed mental health professionals, we warmly invite you to join our Summer 2026 NARM Therapist Training, a hybrid online or in-person immersion into the transformative power of the neuroaffective relational model. You will be part of a supportive learning community, integrating mindfulness and clinical expertise. Through 4 comprehensive modules, you'll gain specialized, trauma-informed knowledge and skills to confidently and compassionately address the impact of adverse childhood experiences and complex trauma. Visit complextraumatrainingcenter.com to learn more and secure your spot in this hybrid online and in-person training experience in Salt Lake City, Utah.